Now then, let us turn it over to our first guests. And please note that there is going to be time during the discussion for the educators present to ask questions of our guests. So if a question comes to you, and be thinking about how you want to take this work back to your community, if a question comes to you, please submit your question to Dan Marshall directly in the chat. And we may even bring you on screen. So y'all get presentable because company's here. So to prepare for this conversation, let's take a look at today's first opera, Fire Shut Up in My Bones. Dan, let's look at that clip.
I sway, my roots run deep. I draw my strength from underneath. I come right, I sway.
Yes, yes, yes. And now it is my tremendous honor to welcome two shining lights from the world of opera. One is a scholar, a professor at the University of Michigan, and the author of numerous works, including the book Black Opera, the essay on Fire Shut Up in My Bones in the Met Season book, of which you likely have a copy. And this one is Marcia Drummond's favorite, the CNN article, Beyonce's Homecoming, Why the Opera World Should Take Notes. Our other guest is a renowned musician and composer whose work encompasses jazz, film scores, Broadway shows, and now 2 operas. He is a 2-time Oscar nominee for BlacKkKlansman and Da 5 Bloods, a Grammy winner, and today he gets the greatest honor of all, joining all of you here at the Met Educators Conference. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Naomi André and Terence Blanchard. Friends, the Zoom is yours.
Hello there, and hello to everyone, and also to my wonderful Zoom screen friend, Mr. Terence Blanchard, wonderful composer. What a pleasure to see you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
My understanding is that this is my first time doing this, so I'm really excited, is that I'm going to say a couple of comments up front, some things to think about, and then we'll get into a conversation, and then we will have questions and comments and discussion from the audience. Does that sound like a good plan?
Sounds great.
Terrific. I want to say that it is such a huge honor to be involved in this afternoon's event. Oh, but wait a minute. Before I do that, I was so impressed with how people were describing how they are. So my name is Naomi André. I've never done this before, quite like this, but let's see if I can get it all. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am an African-American woman with long sister locks, and I'm wearing a sort of floral shirt with a blue collar, and I'm in my office on the bottom of my tri-level, a house I bought a couple of years ago, right before the pandemic, thank goodness. And I'm here in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I'm a professor at the University of Michigan. I think that, and I have blue glasses, which are my fun Zoom glasses. But I want to say it's really a pleasure and an honor to be here. I'm so impressed with the outreach with the Metropolitan Opera. And I just want to thank Kamala Schelling, Marcia Drummond, Dan Marshall. Thank you so much for pulling this together. Thank you, Susan Blackwell, for this wonderful setting this tone. I am somebody who works with college university students, and I feel incredibly honored and happy to be working with young people and helping them with their sort of learning about music. I teach in the liberal arts college and I teach non-music majors. However, I want to say that you out there, the teachers who teach elementary, middle school, and high school, you are my real heroes, because you are bringing this music to, like, you're really shaping what they hear from the earliest imprints. So thank you, thank you. What a pleasure. And I'm really happy. It's a pleasure to be able to engage in a conversation with Terence Blanchard, because his music has been in my ear, even though I didn't know it, for years. And I will say I'm a huge jazz fan, though I know much less about jazz than opera, so I'm always learning more. But just in terms of the film scores, and only with Spike Lee, if we think about this, Do the Right Thing, Mo Better Blues, Malcolm X, Clockers, Summer of Sam, 25th Hour, Inside Man. I saw all of those in the theater as I was going through college. And so I feel like your voice has been a part of in my ear for a long time. And there's Black Klansman, Da 5 Bloods, working with Casey Lemons and Harriet. I love those Perry Mason remake. Oh, wow. Perry Mason the series that I watched during the pandemic, One Night in Miami, directed by Regina King. I mean, it's like you've got this voice that is out there, and you're working with, I mean, those were just when you were writing for film. There's also the whole solo work and your groups that you work with. So it's really a pleasure. I'm going to say just a couple of words because I want everybody to know that Terence Blanchard does not work in a vacuum. And not just like sitting in a vacuum machine, but that he is not the only person writing operas as about Black experience and as a Black person. He is part of what I want to call a golden age of Black opera and is right there in the leaders, but he's got some wonderful colleagues. So let me just back it up a little bit and spend just a few minutes, I promise. I know I'm a professor, but I won't go on too long, talking about sort of how do we think of this opera that the Met has done, and it's like no other opera they've ever done. It's not like Porgy and Bess, and I'm going to tell you why. Black opera. I'm calling this, yes, it's the title of my book. And actually, I didn't even want it to be the title. It's what what my editors said, because I'm like, oh my gosh, what's Black opera? What's white opera? What's, how do we break this down? But they gave me they sell books, and I totally get it. And it's actually been useful as a construction for thinking about Black participation, so operas that feature Black participation, Black subjects, and ways that involve a real deep engagement and care in the representation that we don't get in the dominant culture. I also feel that Black opera brings perspectives, Black perspectives and experiences to the forefront in terms of how the story is told and who is telling the story. So I feel like I've just got to give that little overview. In terms of the issue of who writes this construction of Black opera, I definitely think it involves Black folks, but it also involves interracial collaborations. And so that's sort of a question to unpack further, but just wanted to sort of get that out there. I believe we have a shadow culture in the United States of Black people who are involved and participating in opera that goes back to the 19th century. And I'm talking the antebellum time when there was a lot of slavery going on. And in my research, and part of this golden age of Black opera is that finally we've got scholars who are uncovering this and talking about it. Opera, as all of you know, is a beloved tradition, but it has these unfortunate associations of being elitist and primarily white. And that is something we can't deny. However, that's not the full story. And we can now begin to uncover part of this shadow culture where we've got Black singers who were singing opera arias in recitals. And this is, the earliest singer we know, and maybe research is going to give us more information, but we have Elizabeth Taylor Greenfield. We don't know her exact date of birth, but usually it's around in the 18 teens, 1811, 1819. And we know she died in 1876. She was born into slavery, but she was manumitted, freed, when her owner, Elizabeth Taylor Greenfield, so this singer took her owner's name. And when the white woman whose husband died, who was the slave owner in Mississippi, she moved to Philadelphia and became an abolitionist. She gave Elizabeth Taylor Greenfield voice lessons, took care of her. Greenfield's, the Black woman singer's voice was incredible. She ended up going to England and singing for Queen Victoria in the 1850s. We have Matilda Joyner Ciceretta Jones, who was known as the Black Patty. We've got Thomas Bowers, who was known as the Black Mario. Elizabeth Taylor Greenfield was known as the Black Swan. And these sobriquets, these sort of little names, the Black Patty, the Black Swan, were given, the Black Mario, were given it for, to sort of help understand how do we think of Black people who can make these incredible sounds? We're talking about a time of slavery when people did not realize that, or not all people, that Black people are fully human. And while it was very common for white opera singers, Jenny Lind was the Swedish Nightingale, we have something like this that was happening for these incredible Black singers. We've got Black opera companies that were happening right after the Civil War. So that before emancipation and during the antebellum period, Black folks didn't have sort of the resources to gather and sing and put on full operas. However, we know Black folks were singing operas. We have companies, Black opera companies. The earliest is Theodore Drury and his Theodore Drury Grand Opera Company, which was active in 1900 to 1907 regularly, and then sporadically up through 1938. We have the Colored American Opera Company in Washington, and that was just for a couple of seasons in 1872. So even before Drury, there were these other companies that sort of popped up occasionally. We've got the Colored Opera Company of Chicago in 1886, the Creole and Colored Opera Company of 1891, also in Chicago. Mary Caldwell Dawson is another name who we're beginning to know about. She lived from 1894 to 1964, and she put together the National Negro Opera Company. And like Theodore Drury's company that ran for several seasons, the National Negro Opera Company ran from 1941 to 1962. So we've just got a whole lot. I can obviously go on for a lot more. I want to say just a few more things to help put Terence Blanchard as a composer as well as his opera in this larger context. And we have operas by Black composers. The first Black composer we know who was writing operas is Harry Lawrence Freeman. And he has operas. He was born in 1868 and he died in the 1940s. We have Scott Joplin with Treemonisha as well as a few other operas. Clarence Cameron White, Owanga from 1932. And then perhaps one of the most prolific opera composers, Black opera composers, is William Grant Still, where he has Blue Steel, his first opera from 1934, Troubled Island from 1949. That was the first opera performed at a major opera company by a Black composer, and that was New York City Opera in 1949, and just many other operas. More recently, composers who are still living, Terence Blanchard is very happily for him and happily for all of us that he doesn't have to be the only one writing these operas, that we get to enjoy them so much, but he's got colleagues. We have many folks. Some of the leaders are Anthony Davis, who has 3 big operas on Black topics, X, The Life and Times of Malcolm X, which was first performed in 1986, also at New York City Opera. And the Met has just said that they are going to be doing a production of that opera in 2023. We have Davis's Amistad from 97 and the Central Park 5 from 2019 are his other big operas on Black topics. And he's written about other topics too. Nkiru Okoye is one of the women who is the leading Black opera composer composer now. She has a Harriet Tubman, When I Crossed That Line to Freedom opera from 2014, Tales from the Briar Patch from 2019, and some others in progress. And we've got Terence Blanchard with Fire Shut Up in My Bones, which is his second opera. His first opera is Champion from 2013. The other last opera I want to mention is Janine Tesori and Caswell Thompson's Blue, which is from 2019. We have 3 operas. This is the real golden age now, and then I will move on to a conversation with Mr. Blanchard. 2019, the summer of 2019 was an incredibly special, important summer. Opera Theater of St. Louis had commissioned and premiered Fire Shut Up in My Bones. Blue by Janine Tesori is the composer, Caswell Thompson is the librettist, and that was commissioned and premiered at Glimmerglass Opera in the same summer. And also Anthony Davis's The Central Park Five in 2019. All 3 of these operas, I mean, what an amazing thing for 3 operas in one summer, but they're making history. Blanchard's is the first, Fire is the first opera by Black composer at the Metropolitan Opera. Anthony Davis's Central Park Five is the first opera by a Black composer to win the Pulitzer Prize. And Blue is won the Music Critics Association of North America Award for Best New Opera, and is the first one, and hopefully the first of all the others, that has a commercial CD recording, which is going to be released soon. I know about this because they asked me to write the notes. So I am just really thrilled. I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you, but I just wanted to let you know that we are in such an incredible time, and you're being able to learn about Fire Shut Up in My Bones and speak with Terence Blanchard. I mean, we're all making history right now, and it's exciting. So let's dig in. Mr. Terence Blanchard, what a pleasure. I'm a huge fan, not just of the movies, but also of your your presence in what you're doing and how you're able to sort of move between so many places. Do you want to say any opening remarks? I know we all sort of started with who we are, and you can just nod, or like, would you like to do that? Your pronouns and where you are?
I guess my pronouns are he, him. I used to be a salt and pepper guy, but it's all salt these days, on top of my head. I'm wearing clear glasses. I have on a gray sweatshirt, and I'm sitting in a hotel room in New York City near Columbus Circle.
Thank you so much. Well, I get the sense that opera can certainly bring out a lot in people when you talk about salt and pepper. Mm-hmm. So there are just several things I want to talk about. So let's just jump in. Sure. I'm someone who was very fortunate to be able to see Champion, and I noticed that Champion and Fire Shut Up in My Bones have some interesting connections. And so I was wondering, sort of, as your opera oeuvre right now, not that this is what all the and hopefully you'll be writing more, but not that these themes are going to be in all your operas, but I've noticed that both operas are about Black men who were in the public eye, or who still are. Emil Griffith is a boxer, welterweight boxer champion, and Charles Blow, the writer and media commentator. Another element about the story, a really important element, is that both characters, there's this sexual, bisexual identity and sexual expression, which are sort of pivotal moments for the story these operas tell. Both of these operas are challenging traditional ideas around Black masculinity and personhood. Both have strong mothers. Imelda Griffith in Champion, first portrayed by Denise Graves, and then Billy in Fire, who was first performed by Karen Slack and now by LaTanya Moore. And the last point I'll make is both have principal main characters that are portrayed by multiple singers and multiple actors. In Champion, we actually have 3, where there's the little young boy, Emil, that young Emil. So the little young boy, Emil, is a treble, boy soprano. Young Emil is a bass baritone, and Emil, sort of the more mature, older Emil, is a bass. In Fire, there are 2. The Charles baby, a boy treble soprano, and then Charles, the adult, who's a baritone, portrayed by Will Liverman. Okay, so that just gives a whole lot of stuff to put out there. Do you want to talk about any of those, or I would love it if you could talk about some of those with sort of, were you aware that, are you drawn to certain stories? Are you drawn, even though these are stories that focus about men and their stories, you have these strong women, multiple characters. What would you like to jump in up with that?
Well, I mean, for me, it wasn't even about the sexuality. It's really more about, being different in our society and society not accepting those differences. For me, when I look at Charles's story, the thing that resonated with me was the whole idea of being isolated within your own community, and a community that you really wanted to belong to strongly. You know, with the Emil Griffith's story, it was more about, there was a classic line in his book where he said, just to give you a little background on the story, Emil Griffith was a boxer who fought a guy named Benny Paret, and he killed him in the ring. And he was also struggling with his sexuality. And in his autobiography, he said, "I killed the man and the world forgave me, yet I love the man and the world would never forgive me." And I thought that those words were really powerful, because I thought about the first time I won an award. I just turned to my wife, gave her a kiss, and went up and accepted my award without thinking about it. And then it just really broke my heart to think that Emil Griffith could become welterweight champion of the world, but couldn't share that openly with somebody that he truly loved. And in the case of Charles, it's really about a coming of age, and being in a community that didn't accept him because he was just a little different. I related to that being a musician in New Orleans. Even though it's a music town, my neighborhood was really, a neighborhood that was really consumed by sports, which I was consumed by sports too. I wanted to play football when I was a little kid, but walking to the bus stop with my horn case every Saturday on the weekends was not the most popular thing to do, and at a time when I had my piano lessons, we had a big bay window, in the house. And while I'd sit there and practice my lessons, my boys could see me practicing my lesson outside, from outside. And that wasn't the most popular thing either. So I could really relate to those issues. And for me, at this point in my life, I've really been trying to create music that helps heals the soul. Music that I grew up listening to was the thing that helped sustain me in troubled times in my life. And I think it's only my responsibility now as an artist to try to draw upon those experiences to help us all kind of come together, because my thinking is that in this society, it's time for us to start to celebrate our differences, and understand that we all have something to contribute to society, and not try to use those things, to kind of divide us and keep us apart.
I really love this point about having a story that is so specific, and yet, and I struggle with this configuration, there's something that speaks so universally to people. So how you can take a story that looks at sort of feelings of isolation or being so highly visible, like you playing the piano in the bay window and carrying your trumpet around where people know what's in there. And yet there still is a stigma of sort of who gets to play music. And also I think there's elements around gender. Can the guys do this and be really serious? And particularly when we were growing up, or what kind of music are you playing? I know a lot of people look at me and say, "Oh, you're an opera scholar." Once they figure out, okay, I'm not a singer, although I sing for fun, but people don't pay me to sing. But it's like, that's nice, but it feels so far out there. And yet by writing about these stories that have this sort of isolation or being different, it's right there. I'm wondering if sort of opening things up, you or somebody has once said that in terms of American arts, film, musical theater, and jazz are the three big elements that America has contributed. And really, in fact, maybe never does somebody encompass all of those to such a high level. in terms of writing music, sort of approaching it with a music element for film as jazz, and then with musical theater in opera. I'm interested, and maybe this, I don't know if this is easy to articulate. What is it like writing for a film and the difference writing an opera? Is it, and even if you're sort of, I'm not a composer at all. And so I'm fascinated by, are there big blocks of sound in your head? How do you like, how do you
No,
do this?
no, there's just big blocks in my head. That's all. Yeah. No, I think the main difference between the two is that in film, I'm really helping a director with his vision and helping him tell a story through his lens. So, you know, that means that I'm only a portion of the storytelling process. You know, at best, you know, I can be like 60 to 70% of a film. You know, at average, I'm somewhere around 40 or 50% of a film, and it can go down to even 27% sometimes. Rarely, but sometimes. And in writing opera, everything is on me to tell the story, you know, from the beginning. I mean, you know, then obviously we have collaborators, you know, with the librettist and then direction and lighting and all of those things. But in terms of what you're hearing, you know, everything comes from the composer from beginning to end, whether it's silence or not. You know, it's all a decision that's made by a composer. Now, the beautiful thing about opera that's so different to me from film, when I start working on film, everything's done. The decisions about sets and lighting and actors, all of that is done, you know.
So you get the film, the silent film?
Yeah, well, it's not silent, but I do get the film to work on. So I'm working on something visually there's something visually that I'm looking at and I'm responding to. So I get a chance to react to what somebody has already put together. The thing that I love about opera is that I can sit in my studio at my piano and write for 2 years, you know, dealing with the topic and trying to create music that helps tell a story musically. But it's an amazing period when you start to work with directors and collaborators and they start to block out the opera. And all of a sudden there are these people walking around stage singing these lines that you wrote. And once you get past that point, then somebody starts to create a set and give them wardrobes and put lighting onto it. And it just grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. That is the thing that always gets me excited about this particular genre of creativity, you know, because there's so much layering from when I start, which is the total reverse of what happens in film. I'm one of the last cogs in the wheel in film, and in opera, I'm one of the first.
So you get a lot more control. Is it unusual to work with the same people? I'm thinking of Casey Lemons, where you've worked with her on her film for the music for Harriet, but now, and there probably was an overlap of having that relationship, and then also because they both were 2019, then having Fire Shut Up in My Bones, and you had known her from before. What was some of that relationship like?
Oh, it was crazy because you know, Casey's that's my sister, man. We've been like family for a long time, but it was funny because she was asking for music, you know, for the film at the same time that Opera Theater St. Louis was asking for music for the opera, you know. So
oh my, everybody wants some.
Yeah, I had to keep, you know, my phone on mute, man. It's, you know, sometimes I just say, look, I'll get back to you later. I'm busy doing one thing. But you know, Casey, I knew that Casey is the type of artist. She is just very creative, and she's brilliant at what it is that she does. And I knew that I knew on her bucket list, she wanted to write a libretto. You know, she had told me that when we first started working together, you know, on Eve's Bayou years ago. She forgot.
Love that film.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, but she forgot that she told me that, you know, but I remember. So when it came time to do Fire, I thought that she would be the perfect person for it. And I think she was, you know, because the libretto that she's written is very poetic, is very beautifully written, very beautifully organized. There were some challenges, though, in terms of she wrote it like a film script, you know, and that part of it was a little challenging to take to the stage, because, you know, we can't cut back and forth between scenes like you do in a film on a stage production. That takes a lot of time. So we had to do some adjusting as far as that was concerned. But her approach to telling the story, her vision for telling the story and creating these two characters, loneliness and destiny,
Right.
which manifest themselves into an actual person that Charles dates later on, Greta, I thought was brilliant, you know, because we see Charles on this journey throughout his life, struggling with all of these issues. And it starts with him, you know, being upset at the person who molested him, driving back home to actually kill this person, wanting to kill this person. And then the opera is basically a flashback from all of those events. So we have little Charles along with Charles, and then he's also accompanied by Loneliness and Destiny, and who was played by Angel Blue. And he's constantly he's not having conversations with them, they're talking to him mostly throughout the entire process. And then when they manifest themselves into this actual woman, you know, he actually says, you know, you look like Loneliness and Destiny to her in the opera. And it works really well to see how it all comes together. You know, I thought Casey was brilliant in putting those ideas together.
It's pretty amazing with opera. You can't say as much as in a film or spoken drama because it goes too quickly. And yet the music can say other things. So many different things can sing. And so these concepts of loneliness and destiny can be sort of, and I love how you decided to make these female voices that were in an opera that has such a male energy in there, but there's also, it's not just one, and it's very informed. And, you know, Billy is such an amazing character.
Well, you know, also, it's interesting that you bring that up, because one of the things that I find really beautifully done, Camille Brown, who's not only the choreographer, but the co-director of this production, she put together a ballet that opens up the second act of the opera. And it's a very interesting thing when you say male energy, because with what she's done, you know, Charles obviously is struggling with his sexuality, and what she's done with the ballet is she's put together this beautiful piece where you see these 12 male dancers who are making these movements that go traditionally back and forth between what we assume male and female dancers would do, you know. And it's a very subtle thing. I don't know if everybody picks up on it, you know, but it's beautifully done in the way that she tells the story, you know, with Charles. And we start to really have to question, what is this notion of being female or being male in the traditional sense of what people think those movements, what those gestures are, you know, because when I see these dancers, you know, performing that ballet, I just look at it as a very beautiful piece, you know, and a very well-crafted piece that tells the story of Charles's life, you know, struggling with what's going on with him, struggling with being molested. And was that something that kind of sparked this other side of him, this thing that he's questioning in himself, you know. But Camille's approach to it is, I don't know, I've been telling everybody, I feel like she is such a genius because it's rooted in the tradition of dance while still having a forward-looking slant to it, you know, and it's all done very seamlessly and very gracefully, you know. It's one of my favorite parts of the entire production.
I'm so glad you brought that part up. I haven't yet seen it yet here. I'm still here in Michigan, but I'm definitely going to see the HD version on October 23rd. And I think I'm going to be able to make it to Chicago, which is closer when it goes there in February. But opera and ballet, opera and dance go hand in glove. They love each other.
Yeah.
And what I had initially thought of was the big, I think it's in Act 3, the big fraternity dance, which is, you know, based on real dancing. And, you know, it's really important for Black fraternities. And yeah, and that's an all male dance, and it's very rhythmic and percussive. But then to have it contrasted, like that's not the only dance moment.
No.
And to have a dance moment that embraces both sort of what we, instead of this either or of, you know, this is masculine, this is feminine, it sort of blends this both and.
Yes, well, that's the thing. We have three major dance movements. We have the ballet that opens up the second act. We have the step show that opens up the third act, but we also have the little piece from the clip that you've shown, before we started talking.
Right.
And those three things, man, I think are just brilliantly crafted, because I've watched her in rehearsal do the research about all of these things, especially the step show. The step sequence, I'm extremely proud of, because I had given her the basic rhythm behind, the steps.
So that was you. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, so I'd given her the basic rhythm behind that, but man, she took it to a whole nother level. She took it. So I gave her two rhythms, one which started, another one being like a little variation of it. But man, she added so many things to it. It's turned into her own thing. And the thing that I love about it the most is that so many people react to it because they see themselves on the stage at the Met, and that's the thing that blows me away, because it's an important part of our culture. When the opera was in St. Louis and we thought it was running a little long, there was actually a discussion about possibly cutting that scene. And I was vehemently opposed to it, because that scene is like one of the scenes that we don't expect to see in opera, but it's something that's really relevant to all of our lives, especially a lot of us that, not me, I didn't go to HBCU, but a lot of people that did go to HBCUs, that's a relevant part of their lives. And even though I didn't go, we still had that at Rutgers. I was at Rutgers.
Love that. Yeah. Well,
we still had that.
I went to Barnard, a women's college, and I think there might be sororities or things now, but when I was there in the 80s, there weren't. But even still, it was those step shows when I got to hear them from HBCUs. I was like, oh, I felt, and, women don't do it, but it was, so you're absolutely right, your gut instincts. And it's wonderful to share this with audiences that might not be so familiar with it.
No,
I love the fact that you were the one who gave the rhythm, because I was thinking it's mainly sort of a cappella. So how does that work? But you were very connected with it.
Yeah, I mean, my initial thought was to actually have the orchestra do the rhythms with the dancers. Cool. That's why I'd written it out. But, logistically, it's a hard thing, for them to stay in sync, because when you're on stage, they can't necessarily hear what's going on in the pit.
Right.
So we had to make sure that we figured out the best way to do it is just to allow them to do it. And what they did is these guys, they wear these heavy boots, man, and they make sure that they stomp. When I say this is stomp step show, they made sure that they're stomping on the floor real hard so you can actually hear the rhythms that they're playing.
And the acoustics are so wonderful in the house. Oh, that's amazing. So, wow. I'm going to look to Dan, because his camera's open. Should we go to questions? I'm having a great time. I just want to come over and talk with you all day.
I do have a really fantastic, hi, Terence. Hi,
hey, Dan.
Dr. André, great to have you here. Thanks. I have a great question from our friend Andrew Wilson from the School District of Philadelphia. Andra, do you want to come into the Zoom? I see your I'm going to spotlight you, and I'm going to ask you to unmute, and you can ask Terence and Naomi your question directly. Hi, Andra.
Welcome.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey.
Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I've been looking forward to this since I found out who was going to be speaking with us. So my questions for both of you is, sorry, I wrote this down. So what age did you first experience opera for both of you? And what were your initial reactions to the art form? And then this one's for Mr. Blanchard. Since you were taking piano and trumpet as a child and it wasn't as popular as sports, which, still happens today, what were ways to keep you motivated? Did you have anything that you said to your friends? I don't know if, like, my mom told me pretty much I had to practice throughout the years on my French horn. Now I love it. Back then when I was little, not so much.
I'll let you go first, Doctor.
Oh, okay. I can go really quickly. And I think there's sort of a little secret. I'm so glad, Andrew, that you brought this up, because I think our answers are going to have a little similarity. One thing when people ask me, how did you get into opera? Well, the secret in my background is that my mother was a singer and she went to the Juilliard School for a couple of years, and she's a high coloratura. Now, she didn't sing opera when I was younger, but she sang in churches, and she sang Mendelssohn and Handel and sort of lots of classic things. So I grew up with that sound in my ear, and it wasn't such, I never went to an opera with her when I was younger, but it wasn't a big leap. Once I started, I had friends who kind of got me into it, got me hooked.
Right. Well, it was a similar thing for me. You know, my father was amateur baritone, and he studied with a guy named Osceola Blanchard in New Orleans, who was actually a chemistry teacher at one of the public high schools. But he taught my dad and a lot of other African-American males opera, you know, and they would always do recitals. And I used to think those guys were nuts because they would rehearse every Wednesday. And I'm like, dude, and they would bring me, and I'm like, man, can I go do something else on the Wednesday night? You know, and the guy who was teaching them, you know, when I was studying piano at the time, you know, he would always ask me, he would always call me Terence for some reason. And he said, Terence, play your piece, play your new piece. What are you working on? So I grew up in a community that was always, you know, striving to make us understand that we needed to work and strive to be excellent at whatever it is that we wanted to do. So when you talk about like, did I love it? I hated it, you know, because my father would like in the house, I always tell the story, and it's true. It comes off as a joke, but it's true. My father would put on his records, and you would literally hear doors slamming in the house, you know, because people were trying to, he would be in the front with the stereo, and everybody would be like, oh, there he goes. Boom. Let me
Close it out.
Yeah, let me put on the game, you know? And I used to think my father was so strange, you know, because he was into this music. And then years later, I don't know, I heard some things that reminded me of my dad. You know, Carmen was one of the things he used to listen to all the time. But then I heard Lava Wham and some other things, and it just really caught my ear. So for me, it was really, you know, such a surreal experience to be asked to write an opera, you know, and that happened because the guy at Jazz St. Louis, who was talking to Opera Theater St. Louis, remembered that I told him that my dad loved opera and that I heard opera growing up. And it's so interesting now being in this realm, because a lot of times when I'm working on pieces and I'm writing, I'm hearing my dad's voice in my head, you know, and it's so funny because when we did my first opera, Champion, Arthur Woodley, who was a great baritone, he's not with us anymore, but he was a very lovely dude, man, and immensely talented. At the premiere, you know, in St. Louis, when I walked out for the curtain call, he grabbed me and he said, you know, your father would be really proud. And that meant a lot to me, you know, because, you know, the term young and dumb was created for a reason, you know. So a lot of times, you know, I go back and I think about, man, if it wasn't for my father's persistence, I wouldn't be here, you know. And when you talk about your parents making you practice, when I had my piano lessons, my father would sit on the couch. He would sit on the couch while I practiced. You know
To make sure.
Yes, and he would stop. He would literally stop me, and he would say, "Hey, go back. That wasn't right. Go back. Do that again." So there were actually a couple of times in my young life where I just gave up music and went to playing football, you know, because I was so frustrated with the whole idea of being forced to practice. You know, my father sold insurance, and he would always have a whole bunch of change in his pocket because he sold insurance to poor people in New Orleans, and he wanted to make sure that those people could be buried with dignity. So the premiums were a little low, so he would always have to make change for people. So he always had a pocket full of coins, and man, I could be in the back of the house, and as soon as he would hit the door, I would hear that change jingling in his pocket. And I go, oh my God, here he comes. And, you know, to a 10-year-old kid, when you go in the back, hey, boy, don't you have a recital in 2 months? I'm like, yeah, it's in 2 months. He goes, you need to be practicing. I'm like, it's in 2 months. You know, that was my thinking, you know, but because of that, I have a work ethic now that has served me well because of it, you know. my father was a workaholic, and I've picked up the same trait of, not wanting to stop until things are finished. Because for me, I'd rather relax after being finished than be stressed trying to finish and meet a deadline.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Andra, for that question. Are there more questions?
I'm not seeing any other questions. We got a lovely comment from our friend Ellen in New Hampshire saying her father did the exact same thing when she was learning classical guitar.
Yeah, you know what was funny about that, man? When we did the movie Mo Better Blues, and I was on set the day that they were shooting the scene with Abby Lincoln, making a little kid practice the trumpet.
Yeah.
I had to walk away, man. I couldn't stand there and watch it. I was like, this bringing back too many memories, man. It's not. And so, you okay? Yeah, man, I'm good. I'm just gonna step over here while you call me when you're done.
It's a hard call with parenting children. You want to give them the best, and it sounds like your dad was sowing seeds. Like this whole program is about sowing seeds. What you play for them, everybody's first reaction to operatic singing, I think it's going to be a little like, whoa. Whoa.
But the thing that I do want to stress, and this is something I think we need to talk about, is that it wasn't just my dad, it was an entire community. You know what I mean? And that's the thing that I think is so important. I got emotional one day sitting out, running through all the names in my head of people that taught me or people that tried to inspire me, who were either musicians or loved the arts, and that was a thing in our community that I didn't see on TV. I didn't see these people in movies. I didn't see these people being celebrated, you know what I mean? But these were all people who either loved opera or loved jazz or loved classical music. And whenever I would encounter them, they were always asking me, so what are you working on? All right, so are you practicing? And it was one of these things where I felt like, wow, there's something that I really need to get together, because this is a part of who we are, and it made a huge difference in my life. And it's one of the things that I think is so important in terms of education, because sometimes, I think young kids need to have this well-rounded experience of hearing the same things from not just from one person, but from hearing it from a community, to let them know that, there are other things out here in the world than the things you see on television and the things you hear at that time, things that you would hear on the radio. There's a vast array of expressions, and when you work hard at anything, the rewards can take you places that you could have never imagined, and for the educators that are on this thing, I'm just here to tell you, I was a guy that could never see this coming. I thought that I was going to be a person who had a day job, who played in clubs at night because I loved music, period. I could, if you would have asked me if I would have not even doing an opera, but just being a successful jazz musician traveling the world, that wasn't on my mind. My mind was just trying to be the best musician I could be because I love playing music. And as a result of that, it's taken me all around the world. It's allowed me to play for presidents. It's allowed me to meet all of my heroes and experience things that I could have never imagined experiencing at a young age.
I so appreciate you're talking about how hearing these stories so many times and how I think it's sort of a revelation. I'll also mention that Casey Lemons was an opera fan before she wrote this libretto. I mean, for her desire, that you can have 3 African-American folks in their, moving into their midlife.
I'm about to say, be careful.
Yeah, I know. I was trying to be really serious. I'm in my 50s, so and you're just a youngin', I'm sure. But how growing up, it really makes a difference, and that there are other stories than the trauma drama or the trauma porn about Black folks always having the hard times. It's like you've got the joy of the music along with the other stuff. I
want to go back to something because I missed one thing about Andrew's question. The other part about all of this was when I went to the arts high school. Soon as I got to arts high school and I started running into kids, and let me back up, even before arts high school, my aunt, my mom's sister, who's a vocal coach and a piano teacher, used to put me in summer music camps at Loyola University in New Orleans.
Oh,
When
wow.
I started running into kids my age who had the same interest as me, man, that was a wake-up call. You know,
It's huge.
that started to make me feel like I wasn't so alone, that I wasn't crazy for having these feelings of wanting to do this, you know. And then when I got to the arts high school, it was literally the first time that, you know, I wanted to go to school every day. I remember laughing one time because, you know, I had a, you know, I don't know if it was flu or a cold, but I had a temperature and I was coughing. And my mom told me to stay home. And I said, no, I'm going to go to school. And I had to catch myself when I said it. You know,
Wow.
I'm like,
Oh,
dude, did you really want, because I felt like I was learning something every day that was meaningful to me, you know, when I went to the arts high school.
wow. Oh, it's great these experiences are out there because I get the sense, luckily it was an arts high school for you, but a camp or some small interaction where you realize, wait a minute, I'm not the only one. I
Exactly.
think we have one more question that we can squeeze in. Let's
Do
do it.
I'd love to bring to the screen a wonderful educator from Atlanta, Garnetta Penn. Garnetta, can you ask your question? I'm going to ask you to unmute. There you go. Did you see it?
I know it's always hard to figure these things out.
I know.
There you
Okay.
go.
All right. Good evening. Musically, what was an exciting moment that keeps you? I've been listening to you for a long time, and you just keep evolving. So my question is, musically, what is the thing that keeps you growing as a musician and exploring different genres?
Well, for me, it was the way that I was taught. I hate to keep going back to that, but that's the reason why we're here. It was the way I was taught that to be an artist is to always grow and evolve. It's not to settle and, you know, and become a reoccurring theme of one thing, you know. And then my heroes were people like Miles Davis, who always tried to move forward, Wayne Shorter and Herbie Hancock. As a matter of fact, I went on tour with Herbie Hancock around the time that Obama was elected the first time, because we all had to do absentee ballots. That's why I remember. And we were on tour with Herbie, and we were playing one of his tunes, but he rearranged it in such a way that was almost unrecognizable from the original recording. And one day at the sound check, you know, he started playing the old version, and so the guys in the rhythm section jumped on their instruments to play with him real quick, and they were like, "Yeah, that's the way that I heard it when I was a kid." And we were all like jazz, and I was sitting there upset because I didn't have nothing to do, but I was just sitting there next to the piano while they were playing. And Herbie had his head down. He didn't realize what we were doing. He was just messing around. And when he finished, he jumped up and he said, "Man, that just sounds so old to me," you know? And we were all like, "Oh yeah, that's old." You know what I mean? It made me realize that being an artist is always about evolving and growing. You know, I think it would be very boring for me to just sit down and try to do the same thing over and over again. And the thing that I've always loved is that, like I said before, I've had great teachers. My composition teacher is a guy named Roger Dickerson, you know, in New Orleans, who always used to make me visualize my future when I was a kid. He would always say, "Tell me what you see yourself doing in 10 years from now." He would always make me visualize these things. And then as a result, when those things started to happen, I would always call him. So when Spike called me to do my first film, I called him. You know, I said, "Man, I got this project. What do I do?" He said, and I was looking for like some really serious guidance. And he said, "Trust your training." I was like, "Okay, all right, dude, all right." You know, and then when it came time to do my first opera, I called him again. And I said, "You know, Roger, I have this project." Because he had written operas, he had written, you know, concertos and stuff for orchestra. And he said, "Don't write opera, tell a story," you know. So my whole upbringing has been geared towards not being in one place, not staying in one place, always searching to grow and get better, you know. And it's one of the things that I've always tried to do. Like, you know, my kids and my family, you know, they know, like, if I'm not working on a project, I'm online reading about equipment or reading about something, trying to better myself, you know, when I have downtime, because I just want to get better at everything, you know. Even with the success of Fire Shut Up in My Bones, people have been asking me, "What does it feel like?" Well, for me, it's kind of numb in the sense that there's so much going on, I can't really comprehend everything that's going on. But you know, while I'm sitting there listening to it, I keep thinking, man, I should have changed that transition, or maybe I should do this with the orchestration, or maybe when it goes to Chicago, I'll take this. And I was sitting there last night, we were at one of the performances, and I was sitting there saying, okay, when I get the HD version, I'm gonna go through the score scene by scene and just make some corrections. And that's what was on my mind last night, you know, listening to it. So
Wow.
I try to tell my students all the time, you never stay in one spot. And here's the other reason why I'm like that, is because one of my trumpet teachers told me, he said, you never stay in one spot. He says, because while you're in one spot, the world is moving forward. So you're actually moving backward if you're not trying to make yourself better at any given time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Garnetta, for what a terrific question. Well, I just want to make a suggestion, although please don't take it if it's not at all helpful. But when you're sitting there thinking about what to tweak or change, give yourself a break and think about restore yourself to do more projects.
Well,
we want more, which is so greedy.
You know, it's funny that you said that, because the night of the gala, man, I was just sitting there saying, okay, wow, we got through it. Everything was great. The performances were amazing, you know, and I feel very blessed to have this behind me right now. And I'm just enjoying the moment with my family. And Yannick, the conductor, he gets up and he says, well, at the gala on the microphone, he gets up and he says, well, we want to officially commission Terence to write another one. And I went, okay, dude, can I just get a nap?
No, take the restoring break you need. And keep that idea that there's another thing if you want it.
Yeah.